Hello everyone, glad to have you here. If this is your first time, don't forget to subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories like this. Now, get comfortable. It's time to dive into the story. Day 1 on Acorn Street, and the world feels like it's holding its breath. I never thought the narrow cobblestones of Beacon Hill would become a prison. But here I am, trapped between brick walls that once drew tourists with cameras and now echo with the shuffle of the dead. The irony isn't lost on me. This street was supposed to be one of the most photographed in America. Now it's a photograph no one will ever take again. I crouch behind the shutters of a brownstone window, peering through a crack. The infected move slowly, their feet dragging across the uneven stones. Their moans bounce between the tall brick facades, turning the street into a canyon of sound. There aren't many of them yet, but enough to keep me pinned here. Acorn Street is narrow, too narrow. If they see me, there's nowhere to run. The townhouse I broke into smells of dust and old wood. Whoever lived here left in a hurry. Drawers pulled open, clothes scattered, a suitcase abandoned by the door. I found a half-empty bottle of water on the counter and a stale granola bar in the pantry. That's all. My stomach growled when I ate it. But hunger is better than the silence. Silence makes you think too much. I keep telling myself this is temporary. That the National Guard will sweep through, that the sirens I heard last night meant someone was still fighting. But deep down, I know better. Boston fell fast. Too fast. The Charles River bridges jammed with cars. The common filled with screams, the skyline burning. I saw it all from the hill before I ducked into this house. The city isn't coming back. The cobblestones outside glisten with last night's rain. I can see the reflection of the infected in the puddles. Their faces warped, their eyes empty. One of them stops, tilts its head, and sniffs the air. My breath catches. I press my back against the wall, heart hammering. After a moment, it shuffles on, following the others. I exhale slowly, afraid even the sound of relief might betray me. I've barricaded the door with a bookshelf, but I know it won't hold if they push. These houses weren't built for sieges. They were built for charm, for history, for postcards. Now they're coffins waiting to be sealed. I move quietly, checking each room, memorizing the creaks in the floorboards. Every sound matters. Every shadow matters. From the upstairs window, I can see the Charles River in the distance, gray under the morning sky. Smoke rises from the direction of Cambridge. Helicopters circled there yesterday, but today the sky is empty. The silence above is worse than the noise below. It means no one is watching anymore. I found a radio in the living room, an old portable with fading batteries. I twist the dial, searching for voices, for anything. Static. Just static. I log the time anyway, scribbling in the margins of a notebook I found on the desk. If I stop recording, I stop existing. That's what I tell myself. The infected pass again, their groans fading as they move toward Charles Street. I know they'll be back. They always come back. Acorn Street is a funnel, and I'm caught at the end of it. Day 1 begins with hunger, fear, and the knowledge that I am alone. But I'm still breathing. And as long as I'm breathing, I'll keep writing. Because if the world ends and no one remembers, then it's like we were never here at all. The first time one of them looked straight at me, I felt the street itself shrink. Acorn Street is already narrow, a cobblestone throat between brick walls. But when its eyes found mine, it felt like the walls pressed closer, squeezing the air out of my lungs. I had been peering through the shutters again, foolishly curious. The infected shuffled past in their usual slow rhythm, dragging feet, slack jaws, the sound of bone against stone. I told myself I was safe as long as I stayed quiet, but then one stopped. A woman, or what used to be one. Her hair was tangled, her dress torn, her skin gray with rot. She tilted her head and for a moment I thought she was listening. Then her eyes lifted and they locked on the crack in the shutters. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. My muscles turned to stone. She didn't move at first, just stared as if she could see through the sliver of wood into the room where I crouched. Then she let out a low moan, deep and guttural, and the sound echoed off the brick walls like a siren. The others turned. One by one, their heads swiveled toward the townhouse. Their moans joined hers, a chorus of hunger that filled the narrow street. My heart pounded so hard I thought they'd hear it. I backed away from the window, careful not to let the shutters rattle. The scratching started next. Nails against wood, claws against stone. They pressed against the door, against the shutters, testing the barricades. The bookshelf I dragged in front of the entrance shuddered with each push. I gripped the handle of a kitchen knife I'd found in the drawer, though I knew it was useless. If they broke through, I wouldn't stand a chance. Minutes stretched into hours. Or maybe it was only seconds. I couldn't tell. Time bends when fear takes over. I sat in the corner, knife in hand, listening to the groans outside. The sound rose and fell like waves crashing a gold ashore. Every creak of the floorboards, every drip of water from the pipes felt like a betrayal. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The moans faded. The scratching ceased. I dared to crawl back to the window, heart still hammering. The street was empty again. The infected had drifted away, their attention stolen by some other sound, some other scent. But the woman was still there. She stood in the middle of the cobblestones, staring at the townhouse, her head tilted, her body swaying slightly as if she were listening to something only she could hear. Then slowly she turned and shuffled after the others, disappearing around the corner. I stayed by the window long after she was gone, staring at the empty street. My hands shook so badly I dropped the knife. The sound of it clattering on the floor made me flinch, certain they'd come rushing back. But the silence held. That was my first encounter. Not a fight, not a chase, just a look. But it was enough. Enough to remind me that the barricades are only wood and nails, that the walls are only brick and mortar, and that the dead are patient. They don't need to rush. They don't need to sleep. They only need to wait. And sooner or later, I'll make a mistake. I thought I was alone in the brownstone. For 2 days, I moved like a ghost through its rooms, whispering to myself, rationing crumbs, listening to the dead scrape their nails along the shutters. But on the third night, I heard footsteps that weren't mine. At first, I thought it was them. The infected had found a way inside. My chest tightened, and I gripped the kitchen knife until my knuckles went white. The sound came from the stairwell, slow but deliberate, not the dragging shuffle of the dead. These were careful steps, measured human. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering as a shadow stretched across the hallway. Then a voice, low and steady. Don't move. We're not here to hurt you. 2 figures emerged from the dark. The first was a woman in scrubs, her hair tied back, her face pale but determined. She held a flashlight in one hand, a length of pipe in the other. The second was a man in a torn Red Sox jacket, his beard strewn with gray, a tire iron slung over his shoulder. The woman spoke again. Name's Maya, nurse at Mass General. This is Reggie. We needed shelter. Didn't know anyone was here. I lowered the knife but didn't let go. Daniel, I said, my voice rough from days of silence. This house is mine now. Reggie snorted. House doesn't belong to anyone anymore. Just walls and a roof. We're all squatters in the graveyard. Maya shot him a look, then turned back to me. We're not looking for trouble, just a place to breathe. We'll pull our weight. I studied them in the dim light. They looked exhausted, clothes torn, eyes hollow. Survivors like me. But trust is a currency I can't afford to spend. If you make noise, if you draw them in, you're gone, I said. Reggie grinned without humor. Fair enough, but you'll want us around when they come knocking. And they will. We sat in the living room, the three of us, the silence between us heavier than the barricades on the doors. Maya unwrapped a bandage on her arm, revealing a gash that needed cleaning. She worked on it herself, hands steady, jaw clenched. Reggie leaned back, eyes scanning the boarded windows, muttering about how Beacon Hill used to be full of tourists snapping pictures. Now it's just us and the freak show outside, he said. I didn't answer. My mind kept circling the same thought. More people meant more mouths, more noise, more risk. But it also meant more eyes, more hands, more chances to survive. Later, as the night deepened, the infected returned. Their moans drifted up the street, echoing between the brick walls. We froze listening. One of them slammed against the door, rattling the barricade. Maya's hand tightened on her pipe. Reggie raised his tire iron. I held my breath. The pounding stopped. The moans faded. Silence returned. In that silence, something shifted. We weren't friends. Not yet. But we were no longer strangers. We were survivors trapped on the same narrow street, forced together by hunger and fear. I don't know if I can trust them, but I know this. Alone, I won't last. Together, maybe we stand a chance. Night in Beacon Hill is different now. The gas lamps along the brick sidewalks used to glow like something out of a postcard. Tourists snapping photos of the cobblestones, couples laughing as they strolled past. Tonight, the lamps are dark, the street is silent, and the only light comes from the pale moon spilling between the rooftops. Inside the brownstone, we sit in shadows, listening. The infected always grow louder after sunset. Their moans rise with the night air, echoing between the narrow walls of Acorn Street until it feels like the sound is inside the house itself. Every groan, every scrape of bone against stone rattles the barricades we've built. The bookshelf at the door trembles with each thud, and I can see dust falling from the ceiling beams. Maya sits near the window. Pipe across her knees, her eyes fixed on the shutters. She hasn't spoken in hours. Reggie paces the living room muttering under his breath. The tire iron swinging loosely in his hand. I can tell he's trying to mask his nerves with bravado, but the sweat on his forehead betrays him. I keep my log open, scribbling notes by the dim glow of a flashlight wrapped in cloth. Writing steadies me, gives me something to focus on besides the chorus outside. But even the scratch of my pen feels too loud. Every sound feels like an invitation. Then the scratching starts. Nails against wood. Slow and deliberate. One of them has found the shutters again. The sound crawls up my spine and I see Mia's grip tighten on the pipe. Reggie stops pacing, his eyes darting to the door. For a moment, none of us breathe. The scratching turns to pounding, a heavy thud against the barricade, then another. The bookshelf shutters, the wood groaning under the pressure. Reggie curses under his breath, raising the tire iron. Maya whispers, not yet. Don't make noise. We wait. The pounding continues, steady, relentless. My heart hammers in my chest. Each beat louder than the last. I imagine the door splintering, the dead pouring in, their hands reaching, their teeth snapping. I grip the knife tighter, though I know it won't be enough. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stops. The silence is worse than the noise. We sit frozen, straining to hear. A low moan drifts away, then another, until the sound fades into the distance. The infected have moved on for now. Reggie exhales sharply, slamming the tire iron against the wall in frustration. We can't keep doing this, he mutters. One night they'll push harder and that door won't hold. Maya doesn't look at him. Then we make it hold, she says quietly. Her voice is steady, but her eyes betray the fear she won't admit. I close the notebook, my hands trembling. The silence stretches, heavy and suffocating. Outside, the city is dead. But inside this house, the weight of survival presses down on us. We are strangers forced together by circumstance, bound by fear and hunger. Trust is fragile, and the night is long. As I lie on the floor, staring at the cracked ceiling, I realize something. The infected aren't the only danger. The real threat is the waiting, the endless nights of listening, the slow erosion of hope. That's what will break us before the barricades ever do. Nightfall in Beacon Hill has begun, and it feels like it may never end. Morning comes without sunlight. The shutters block most of it, and the rest is swallowed by the gray sky over Beacon Hill. Inside the brownstone, the air is heavy with hunger. We gather in the kitchen, 5 strangers, bound by circumstance, staring at the meager pile of food spread across the counter. 2 cans of beans, a half bag of rice, 3 bottles of water. That's it. Reggie leans against the wall, arms crossed, his Red Sox jacket strewn with dirt. That's not enough for 5 people, he says flatly. Hell, it's barely enough for 2. Maya kneels by the counter, her hands steady as she sorts the cans. We can stretch it if we're careful. Half portions, maybe less. It'll buy us time. Elias, the firefighter, shakes his head. His voice is gravel, worn from years of smoke and shouting. Half portions won't keep us strong. Weak bodies make mistakes. Mistakes get us killed. Claire sits at the table, her knees pulled to her chest, eyes darting between us. She doesn't speak, but her stomach growls loud enough for all of us to hear. She hugs herself tighter as if she can squeeze the hunger away. I write the inventory in my notebook, each word heavier than the last. Food isn't just sustenance anymore. It's power. Whoever controls it controls us. Reggie pushes off the wall, stepping closer. We need rules, strict rations, no exceptions. Everyone gets the same no matter what. Carla would have argued for her kids in the last story, but here it's Maya who pushes back. Her voice is calm, but her eyes are sharp. CLA's younger. She needs more than the rest of us. If we split everything evenly, she'll starve faster. Reggie scoffs. Starve faster? We're all starving. You think the dead care how old she is? Equal shares or this turns ugly. Elias slams his fist on the counter, the sound echoing through the kitchen. Enough. We're not animals fighting over scraps. We'll divide it fairly, but we'll also plan for what comes next. Sitting here waiting to die isn't an option. The silence that follows is thick. Outside, a moan drifts up the street, faint, but unmistakable. The infected are still out there, patient as ever. Maya finally breaks the silence. We'll cook the rice tonight. 1 cup split 5 ways. Tomorrow, 1 can of beans. Rotate water every 12 hours. Half a bottle each. It's not perfect, but it keeps us alive. Reggie mutters under his breath, but doesn't argue further. Elias nods reluctantly. Claire just stares at the food, her lips pressed tight. I jot down the plan in my notebook, though I know it won't last. Hunger changes people. It sharpens tempers, erodes trust, turns allies into enemies. Already, I can see it in Reggie's eyes. The way he watches the cans like a gambler eyeing his last chips. Later, when the others drift into uneasy silence, I slip the notebook shut and glance at the cupboard. Behind a stack of dusty plates, I've hidden the can of peaches I found days ago. No one else knows. The guilt nor at me, but the hunger nor harder. Rationing has begun. But it's not just food we're dividing. It's trust. It's hope. It's the fragile thread holding us together. And I can feel that thread fraying with every empty stomach. The knock came just after dusk. At first, I thought it was the infected again, pounding with their broken hands against the barricade. But this sound was different. Sharp, frantic, deliberate. 3 quick raps, then silence. Then again, louder. We froze. Maya's eyes darted to the door, her knuckles white around the pipe. Reggie raised his tire iron, muttering. It's a trick they're learning. Elias shook his head, listening. No, he said. That's human. The knock came again, followed by a voice high, trembling, desperate. Please, please let me in. They're coming. My stomach clenched. A survivor or bait? We'd heard stories raiders using children's voices to lure people out. But the fear in that voice was raw, unpracticed. It cut through the walls like a blade. Reggie cursed under his breath. We opened that door. We're dead. Could be infected already. Could be leading them right to us. Maya stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. It's a kid. You can hear it. We can't just leave her out there. Elias growled. Compassion gets you killed, but so does hesitation. Decide fast. The pounding grew more frantic. Please, they're right behind me. I moved to the window, peering through the shutters. In the dim light of the street, I saw her. A girl, maybe 16 or 17, hair tangled, backpack slung over one shoulder. She banged on the door with both fists, tears streaking her dirt-smeared face. Behind her, shadows shifted at the far end of the street. The infected were coming. They'll hear her, I whispered. If we don't act, they'll be on us. Reggie shook his head violently. We let her in. We're finished. One more mouth. One more liability. She could be bitten. Maya's voice cut through the argument. Then I'll take responsibility. But I won't sit here and listen to a child die outside our door. The decision wasn't really a decision. Elias shoved the booze shelf aside with a grunt, and together we pulled the door open just enough for her to slip through. She stumbled inside, gasping, eyes wide with terror. Elias slammed the door shut, the barricade rattling back into place just as the first moans rose from the street. We stood in silence, listening as the infected shuffled closer, their groans echoing off the brick. The girl pressed herself against the wall, clutching her backpack like a shield. Her chest heaved, her breaths ragged. Name, Reggie demanded, his voice sharp. CLA, she whispered. CLA Donovan. I was with my parents. They didn't make it. Her voice cracked on the last words, and she bit her lip to keep from sobbing. Maya knelt beside her, checking her arms, her neck, her legs. No bites, she said firmly. She's clean. Reggie muttered something under his breath, but he didn't argue further. He just paced, glaring at the door as if daring it to break. Claire sank to the floor, hugging her knee. Thank you, she whispered. I thought I was dead. No one answered. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant groans outside. I wrote her name in my notebook. The letters shaky. Another survivor. Another risk. Another thread in this fragile web we're weaving. We saved her tonight. But in this world, saving someone is just the beginning of the danger. The stairs creaked beneath my weight as I climbed toward the attic. Dust floated in the beam of my flashlight, swirling like ghosts disturbed from their rest. The others stayed below, whispering about food and safety, but I needed air. I needed to see the city with my own eyes, even if what I saw broke me. The attic window was small, its glass cracked, but beyond it, I found a hatch leading to the roof. The wood groaned as I pushed it open, and the night air rushed in, cold and sharp. I pulled myself up, boots scraping against the shingles, and for the first time in days, I stood above Acorn Street. Boston stretched out before me, a city I barely recognized. The skyline was jagged with smoke, plumes rising from fires that burned unchecked. The Credential Tower loomed in the distance, its windows shattered, flames flickering inside like a lantern for the dead. The Charles River glimmered faintly under the moonlight, but its surface was broken by the silhouettes of abandoned boats drifting aimlessly. From up here, the silence was deceptive. At first, it seemed peaceful, almost beautiful. The historic rooftops of Beacon Hill bathed in silver light, the cobblestones below glistening from the rain. But then the sounds reached me. The low constant moan of the infected carried on the wind. The occasional scream sharp and short cut off too quickly. The distant crack of gunfire followed by silence. I scanned the streets below. Dozens of infected wandered aimlessly, their movements slow but purposeful. Like ants searching for a trail, they drifted between the parked cars. Their shadows long and twisted. Some pressed against doors, others clawed at windows. They weren't rushing, weren't frantic. They were patient. And patience is worse than rage. To the east, I saw Boston Common. Once a place of picnics and protests, now it was a graveyard of tents and bodies. The makeshift Meyer Yugi camp had collapsed into chaos. From here, the white canvas shelters looked like bones scattered across the grass. I thought of the families who must have huddled there, waiting for help that never came. I turned toward the river. The Longfellow Bridge was clogged with cars, their headlights still faintly glowing where batteries hadn't yet died. The jam stretched across the span, a frozen exodus that never made it out. I could almost hear the horns, the shouts, the panic of that final day. Now it was just metal and silence, a monument to desperation. Behind me, the brownstone groaned as the wind shifted. I crouched low, scanning the rooftops. A few blocks away, I saw movement. Figures darting across another roof line. Not infected. Too fast. Too deliberate. Survivors. My chest tightened. Were they allies or predators? In this world, the line blurred too easily. I stayed on the roof longer than I should have, the cold biting through my jacket, my legs trembling from the climb, but I couldn't look away. This was my city, my home. And it was dying before my eyes. The history, the beauty, the life, it was all being swallowed by fire and silence. Finally, I lowered myself back through the hatch, sealing the night behind me. My hands shook as I climbed down the stairs. The images burned into my mind. When I reached the others, I didn't tell them everything I saw. I just said, "Boston's gone." And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't admitted before. We weren't surviving in Boston anymore. We were surviving in its grave were. It started with a sound none of us wanted to hear, a splintering crack from below. At first, I thought it was the pipes, the old house groaning under its own weight. But then came the second crack, sharper, followed by the unmistakable thud of something heavy slamming against wood. The basement door. We froze in the kitchen, every muscle locked. Maya's eyes widened, her hand tightening on the pipe. Reggie muttered a curse, already moving toward the stairwell. Elias, slower but steadier, grabbed his axe from where it leaned against the wall. Claire pressed herself into the corner, her face pale, her breath quick and shallow. The third impact rattled the floorboards. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. The barricade we'd built over the basement hatch wasn't meant for a siege. It was just a dresser and a few nailed planks. Enough to keep us feeling safe. Not enough to hold back the dead. They found a way in, Elias growled. His voice was low, steady, but I saw the fear in his eyes. We hold them here or we're finished. Reggie shook his head. We should run out the back now before they're all inside. Maya snapped. And go where? The street's crawling with them. We leave this house. We're done. Another slam. The wood groaned, splintering. A moan rose from below, guttural and hungry, joined by others. The sound of fists and claws against the door filled the house. A chorus of death demanding entry. Elias moved first. He planted himself at the top of the basement stairs. Axe raised. If they break through, we cut them down one at a time. Funnel them. Don't let them swarm. Reggie gritted his teeth, but took position beside him. Tire iron ready. Maya pulled Claire behind her, pressing the girl against the far wall. I stood frozen for a moment, knife in hand, my heart hammering so loud I thought it might drown out the pounding below. Then the door gave way. It didn't shatter all at once. First a crack, then a hole, then a hand pushing through gray and clawing. The smell hit us next. Rot and damp earth. The stench of graves opened too soon. Elias swung his axe, severing the arm at the wrist. The hand fell to the floor, twitching. Claire screamed, muffled by Maya's hand over her mouth. The door collapsed inward and they came. The first one lunged up the stairs, its face torn, its eyes milky. Elias met it with the axe, the blade sinking deep. Reggie swung his tire iron, the crack of bone echoing through the narrow stairwell. Another followed, then another. The fight was chaos. The stairwell funneled them just as Elias said, but each one that fell was replaced by another. Blood sprayed the walls, the air thick with the stench of decay. My knife felt useless in my hand, but when one stumbled past Elias, I drove the blade into its neck, pushing with all my strength until it collapsed. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, the last one fell, its body tumbling down the stairs into the heap below. The basement was silent again, except for our ragged breathing. Elias leaned against the wall, sweat dripping down his face. That was just the first breach, he said. They'll be back stronger. More of them. Reggie wiped blood from his jacket, his eyes hard. Then this house isn't safe anymore. Maya pulled Claire close, whispering something I couldn't hear. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the broken door, the pile of bodies below, and realized the truth. The brownstone wasn't a refuge. It was a trap, and the dead had just found the way in. The basement still smelled of rot. Even after we dragged the bodies outside and shoved the door shut again, the stench clung to the air, sour and heavy. None of us spoke for a long time. We just sat in the kitchen, listening to the silence, waiting for the next pounding that never came. It was Elias who finally broke it. He leaned against the counter, his axe resting across his knees, his face lined with exhaustion. "This house won't hold," he said. His voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the finality in it. "We got lucky tonight. Next time, luck won't save us." Reggie scoffed, pacing the room. "Sir, so what? You want us to just walk out there? Streets are crawling. We step outside. We're meat." Elias shook his head. "Not if we move smart. We can't stay penned up here waiting for them to break through. We need supplies, real shelter, someplace built to withstand more than a bookshelf and prayers." Maya looked up from where she was tending Claire's scraped knee. "Where?" she asked quietly. Elias didn't hesitate. "Mass General. Across the river. If any place has supplies left, it's a hospital. Medical gear, food stores, maybe even survivors." The room went still. I thought of the hospital, the sprawling complex by the Charles. I'd passed it 100 times in my old life, never imagining it as a fortress. Now it sounded like salvation or suicide. Reggie shook his head violently. "That place will be crawling. You think the sick didn't head there first? You think the dead didn't follow? It'll be a slaughterhouse." Maya's eyes flickered, torn between fear and hope. "But if there's even a chance, antibiotics, bandages, clean water. We can't keep patching wounds with duct tape and prayers. If we stay here, we starve. If we go there, maybe we live." Claire hugged her backpack tighter, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to stay here. I can't. Not after last night." I looked at her at the fear in her eyes and felt the weight of the decision pressing down on all of us. Staying meant slow death. Leaving meant fast death. But Elias was right. The brownstone was no fortress. It was a coffin waiting to be sealed. Elias spread a map across the table, the paper creased and stained. He traced a thick finger along the route. We cut through Boston Common at dawn. Less chance of running into hordes in the open park. Then we pushed to the Longfellow Bridge. Cross fast. Keep low. From there, it's a straight shot to the hospital. Reggie leaned over the map, jabbing a finger at the bridge. That's a choke point. If they're waiting, we're trapped. Then we move fast, Elias said. We don't stop. We don't fight unless we have to. We keep moving. Maya nodded slowly. It's a risk, but it's better than waiting here for the walls to fall. Reggie cursed under his breath, but he didn't argue further. The decision was made whether he liked it or not. I wrote it down in my notebook. Escape plan. Dawn. Through the common across the bridge. Mass General. The words looked fragile on the page like promises we couldn't keep. That night, as we prepared our packs, I sat by the window, staring at the cobblestones of Acorn Street. The infected drifted past in the moonlight, patient as ever. They didn't know we were planning to leave. They didn't care. They had all the time in the world. We didn't. Dawn came gray and thin. The kind of light that makes everything look like a faded photograph. We slipped out of the brownstone in silence. Packs slung over our shoulders, weapons clutched tight. The cobblestones of Acorn Street glistened with dew, but the beauty of it was lost on us. Every step felt like a gamble. Elias led the way, his axe resting across his shoulder. Maya followed close behind, guiding Claire with a hand on her back. Reggie brought up the rear, muttering curses under his breath, tire iron swinging loosely at his side. I stayed in the middle, notebook tucked into my jacket, knife in hand. We moved like shadows, hugging the walls, listening for every scrape and moan. Boston Common stretched before us, a wide expanse of grass and trees that once held laughter, music, and protests. Now it was a graveyard, the refugee camp that had sprung up in the first days of the outbreak. Lay in ruins. Tents sagged, their canvas torn and stained. Sleeping bags lay abandoned, some still occupied by bodies curled in unnatural stillness. The smell hit us first, rot and smoke, thick enough to choke. We moved carefully between the tents, our footsteps muffled by damp grass. Claire's eyes darted everywhere, wide with terror. She clutched her backpack like a lifeline, her breaths shallow. Maya whispered reassurances, though her own voice trembled. Elias raised a hand, signaling us to stop. Ahead, near the frog pond, a cluster of infected wandered aimlessly. Their clothes were ragged, their skin pale and torn, their movements slow but steady. They hadn't seen us yet. We crouched low, hearts pounding, waiting for them to drift away. Reggie leaned close, whispering harshly. We should cut through the public garden. Less open ground. Elias shook his head. Too exposed. Bridges are closer this way. Stay low. Stay quiet. We crept forward, weaving between the tents. Every flap of canvas in the wind made me flinch. Every crow that courted overhead felt like an alarm. I kept my eyes on the ground, careful not to step on bottles or cans. The silence was fragile, and one mistake could shatter it. Then Claire stumbled. Her foot caught on a collapsed tent pole, and she fell hard. The sound of her backpack hitting the ground, echoing louder than a gunshot. The infected turned. Their heads snapped toward us, eyes milky, mouths opening in guttural moans. The sound spread like fire, one voice igniting another until the whole park seemed to groan with hunger. Run! Elias barked. We bolted, weaving through the tents, the dead surging behind us. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but fear pushed me faster. Maya pulled Claire to her feet, dragging her forward. Reggie swung his tire iron at one that lunged too close, the crack of bone echoing through the common. We reached the band and, its white columns looming like a monument to a world that no longer existed. Elias turned, swinging his axe, cutting down one that had nearly grabbed Mia. Blood sprayed across the marble steps. "Keep moving," he shouted. We sprinted toward the edge of the park, the Longfellow Bridge rising in the distance. Behind us, the infected poured through the tents, their moans filling the morning air. By the time we reached the street, my chest was heaving, my vision blurred, but we were alive for now. Boston Common was behind us, but its ghosts clung to us still. We slipped out of the common and into the public garden just as the sun began to rise, its pale light spilling across the lagoon. The water was still, reflecting the skeletal branches of the trees and the hulking shapes of the swan boats moored along the dock. Once those boats carried families and tourists, laughter echoing across the water. Now they sat silent, their white fiberglass bodies strewn with grime, their painted swan heads tilted like mourners at a funeral. Elias raised a hand, signaling us to crouch. Ahead, scattered along the dock and the pathways, the infected wandered. Some stood knee-deep in the lagoon, their clothes soaked, their movements sluggish. Others drifted between the benches and flower beds, their moans low and constant. The sound carried across the water, mingling with the creak of the boats as they rocked gently in the breeze. We huddled behind a hedge, the damp leaves brushing against our faces. Maya whispered, "If we move slow, we can skirt the edge of the lagoon. Stay low. Stay quiet." Reggie shook his head, his jaw tight. "Too many of them. One wrong step and we're boxed in." Claire's breathing quickened. She clutched her backpack, her eyes wide as she stared at the swan boats. "They're watching us," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They're not," I said quickly, though my own heart was pounding. "They don't see us. Not yet." But Claire's gaze was locked on one of the infected standing on the dock. Its head lolled to the side, its jaw slack, but its eyes, clouded, milky, seemed fixed on us. She whimpered, a sound too loud in the fragile silence. Elias turned sharply, his voice a low growl. "Quiet." But it was too late. The infected on the dock let out a guttural moan, its arms twitching as it stumbled forward. The sound rippled across the lagoon, answered by others. Heads turned, bodies shifted, the moans rising like a tide. "Moo! B," Elias barked. We darted from the hedge, sprinting along the edge of the lagoon. The swan boats rocked violently as the infected waded into the water, their hands slapping against the fiberglass hulls. The sound was deafening. Creaks, splashes, moans blending into chaos. Claire stumbled, her foot catching on a broken bench. She fell hard, her backpack spilling open, cans clattering across the pavement. The noise was like a dinner bell. The infected surged toward her, their moans sharpening into frenzied cries. Maya dropped to her knees, grabbing Claire by the arm. "Get up now," she hissed, dragging the girl to her feet. Reggie swung his tire iron, smashing it into the skull of one that lunged too close. Blood sprayed across the pavement, the body collapsing at his feet. I grabbed CLA's backpack, shoving the spilled cans back inside as quickly as I could. My hands shook, my breath ragged, but I forced myself to move. Behind us, the infected splashed through the lagoon, their hands clawing at the swan boats, tipping them sideways. The sight was surreal, those once peaceful vessels now thrashing in the water like dying birds. We ran, our footsteps pounding against the path, the moans chasing us. Elias swung his axe at one that blocked the way, the blade sinking deep. He shoved the body aside, clearing the path. By the time we reached the far edge of the garden, my chest was burning, my legs trembling. We collapsed behind a stone wall, gasping for breath. The infected still moaned in the distance, their cries echoing across the lagoon. Claire sobbed quietly, her face buried in her hands. Maya held her close, whispering reassurances. Reggie cursed under his breath, wiping blood from his jacket. Elias leaned against the wall, his axe dripping. I opened my notebook with shaking hands and wrote one line. The swan boats are empty, but the dead are not. The Longfellow Bridge rose before us like a scar across the Charles, its steel arches silhouetted against the grey morning sky. Once it carried thousands of commuters between Boston and Cambridge, a lifeline of the city. Now it was a graveyard of cars. Their rusting hulks jammed bumper to bumper, doors hanging open, windows shattered. The wind carried the faint stench of gasoline and rot. Elias stopped at the edge, scanning the span. "We move fast," he said. "Stay low, stay quiet. If they're here, we don't stop." But they were here. The first moan drifted from the middle of the bridge, low and guttural. Then another and another. Figures rose between the cars. Pale shapes pulling themselves upright, their heads snapping toward us. Dozens of them, maybe more, scattered across the span like broken statues come to life. Claire whimpered, clutching Mia's arm. "We can't," she whispered. "There's too many." Reggie's jaw tightened. He scanned the bridge, then the street behind us, where more infected were already drifting out of the common. We were trapped between two tides. His eyes narrowed and I saw the decision form before he spoke. "My cab still parked on Cambridge Street," he said. "I left it with half a tank. If I can get it here, I can clear us a path." Maya shook her head violently. "That's suicide." Reggie gave a humorless grin. "Lady, everything's suicide now, but I'm not dying stuck on this side of the river." Before anyone could stop him, he sprinted back toward the street. Elias cursed, gripping his axe. "He won't make it." But he did. Minutes later, the roar of an engine shattered the silence. Reggie's yellow cab came barreling down Cambridge Street. Its horn blaring, headlights flashing. The infected turned as one, drawn to the noise. He swerved onto the bridge, tires screeching, plowing into the first wave of bodies. They flew like ragdolls, bones snapping, blood smearing across the hood. "Move!" Elias shouted. We ran, darting between the abandoned cars as Reggie's cab carved a path through the horde. The bridge shook with the impact, the sound of metal crumpling, glass shattering, bodies thudding against steel. Reggie leaned out the window, shouting curses, his face wild with adrenaline. Halfway across, he slammed the cab into a jackknife truck, pinning a cluster of infected against the railing. Then he threw open the door, a Molotov, in his hand. I don't know where he'd found the bottle, but the fire in his eyes told me he'd been saving it for this moment. "Go," he roared. "Don't stop." He lit the rag, hurled the bottle into the cab, and the world exploded. Flames engulfed the car, the heat searing even from where we ran. The blast echoed across the river, a thunderclap of fire and fury. The infected shrieked, their bodies igniting, their moans turning to screams. We pushed forward, the fire buying us seconds. Maya dragged Claire. Elias swung his axe at stragglers and I stumbled after them. My lungs burning, my ears ringing. Behind us, the cab burned bright against the gray sky, a beacon of sacrifice. When we reached the far side, we collapsed against the railing, gasping for breath. The bridge behind us was a wall of fire, the infected writhing in the flames. Reggie was gone. Maya whispered a prayer. Elias bowed his head. Claire sobbed into her hands. I opened my notebook with shaking fingers and wrote one line. The bridge is made of bones, and today one of them was his. The hospital loomed over us like a fortress of glass and steel. Its windows shattered, its walls strewn with soot. Massachusetts General had always been a beacon in the city, a place where lives were saved, where hope was stitched back together. Now it stood like a mausoleum, silent and waiting. We act cautiously, our footsteps echoing on the cracked pavement. The emergency entrance was littered with abandoned gurneys and overturned wheelchairs. Dried blood stained the sliding doors which hung crooked on their tracks. A single 4-bag swayed in the breeze, its tube dragging across the ground like a snake. Elias raised his axe, scanning the shadows. Stay close. Hospitals are magnets. Everyone ran here. When it started, and the dead followed. Maya's face was pale, but her eyes burned with determination. If there's anything left, supplies, medicine, we need it. We can't turn back now. Claire clutched her backpack, her knuckles white. She whispered. It feels wrong, like they're still here. She wasn't wrong. The air inside was thick with the smell of antiseptic and decay. A sickly mix that clung to the walls. The lobby was a ruin. Chairs overturned, papers scattered, monitors smashed. A child's stuffed bear lay in the corner, its fur matted with blood. We moved slowly, weapons ready. Every sound echoed too loudly. The creak of Elias's boots, the drip of water from a broken pipe, the distant clang of metal somewhere deep inside. The silence wasn't empty. It was waiting. Reggie muttered. Told you this was a bad idea. His voice was low, but it carried. I shot him a look, but he didn't stop. This place is a tomb. We're walking into a damn tomb. Maya ignored him, leading us toward the pharmacy wing. Her steps were steady, but I saw her hands tremble. She knew the risks better than any of us. She'd worked these halls, saved lives here. Now she was walking through its corpse. Halfway down the corridor, we saw them. Shapes slumped against the walls, motionless at first. Patients in hospital gowns, doctors in blood-stained coats, nurses with ID badges still clipped to their collars. Their skin was gray, their eyes closed. For a moment, I thought they were truly dead. Then one stirred. Its head jerked up, eyes clouded, mouth opening in a wet, rattling moan. Another followed, then another. The sound spread like a chain reaction, the hall filling with the chorus of the damned. Back, Elias barked, swinging his axe as the first one lurched forward. The blade split its skull, but more were rising, pulling themselves to their feet with jerky, unnatural movements. We stumbled into a side corridor, slamming the door behind us. The pounding started immediately, fists and claws hammering against the wood. The sound reverberated through the walls, a reminder that the hospital wasn't empty. It was alive with the dead. Claire pressed her hands over her ears, tears streaming down her face. Maya crouched beside her, whispering, "We'll get through this. We have to." Reggie leaned against the wall, his face pale. "Supplies or not, we're not staying. We grab what we can and get the hell out." Elias nodded grimly. "Agreed. But we move fast. Every second we're in here, we're surrounded." I opened my notebook with shaking hands, writing one line as the pounding grew louder. Mass General is no sanctuary. It's a grave with walls. The pounding on the door hadn't stopped, but it had dulled like the dead were circling, waiting for us to make the next mistake. We crouched in the dim corridor, the flicker of failing emergency lights casting long shadows across the walls. Maya's face was set, her jaw tight, her eyes locked on the green sign that read pharmacy at the far end of the hall. "That's where we're going," she whispered. "If there's anything left, it'll be there. Antibiotics, painkillers, bandages. We need it." Elias nodded, his axe resting on his shoulder. "Then we move quiet and fast," Reggie muttered. Quiet and fast, sure, in a building full of corpses. But he followed anyway. Entire iron gripped tight. We crept down the corridor, our footsteps muffled on the linoleum. The walls were smeared with handprints, streaks of dried blood leading toward the pharmacy doors. A gurney lay overturned, its wheels still spinning faintly as if it had only just fallen. Claire clung to Maya's arm, her breath shallow, her eyes darting at every shadow. The pharmacy doors were locked. The glass cracked but intact. Maya knelt, pulling a set of keys from her pocket. "I worked here," she whispered. "I know the locks." Her hands trembled as she tried one key, then another. The third clicked, and the door swung open with a groan. Inside, the shelves were half empty, pill bottles scattered across the floor. Someone had been here before us, looting what they could. But not everything was gone. Maya moved quickly, scanning labels, stuffing antibiotics, gauze, and painkillers into her pack. "This will keep us alive," she said, her voice low but urgent. I stood guard at the door, his eyes scanning the hull. "Hurry," he growled. "They'll hear us." I crouched beside Maya, helping her gather supplies. My hands shook as I shoved bottles into my bag, the labels blurring in the dim light. Every second felt stolen, every breath borrowed. Then the sound came, a low moan, closer than before. Another answered, then another. The pounding on the door behind us grew louder, fists slamming against the wood. The dead had found us. "Time's up," Elias barked. Maya zipped her pack, slinging it over her shoulder. "Got what we need. Move." We bolted from the pharmacy, the moans rising around us. Figures staggered into the corridor, their hospital gowns torn, their eyes clouded. One lurched toward Claire, its hands outstretched. She screamed, stumbling back. Elias swung his axe, the blade cleaving through its skull. Blood sprayed across the wall, the body collapsing at Claire's feet. "Keep moving," he roared. We sprinted down the hall, the dead closing in from every side. Reggie swung his tire iron, smashing it into skulls, clearing a path. Maya dragged Claire forward, her face pale but determined. I stumbled after them, clutching my knife, my lungs burning. We burst through a set of double doors into a stairwell. The moans echoed behind us, the pounding of feet growing louder. Elias slammed the door shut, bracing it with his shoulder. "Go," he shouted. "Get upstairs." We scrambled up the stairs, the sound of fists hammering against the door below. The wood groaned, splintering. Elias followed, his face grim, his axe dripping. When we reached the landing, we collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. Maya clutched her pack, her hands shaking. "We got it," she whispered. We actually got it. But the pounding below hadn't stopped. It was only getting louder. I opened my notebook with trembling hands and wrote one line. "The pharmacy gave us life, but the hospital wants it back." The stairwell reeked of mold and rust. We climbed in silence, the pounding of the dead below echoing faintly through the concrete. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but I forced myself upward one step at a time. When we reached the third floor, Elias shoved open a door and we spilled into a dark corridor lined with offices. The air was different here. Stale but quieter. No pounding, no moans, just the hum of silence. We moved cautiously, weapons raised, our footsteps muffled on the carpet. That's when I saw it. A sign above a door at the end of the hall. "Communications." Something pulled me toward it. I pushed the door open and the smell of dust and burnt wires hit me. Inside the room was cluttered with old equipment, radios, monitors, tangled cords. Most of it was dead, screens cracked, lights dark. But in the corner, a single console still glowed faintly, its red power light blinking like a heartbeat. "Over here," I whispered. Maya hurried in, her eyes widening. "A broadcast room," she breathed. "If this still works." Elias frowned. "It's a risk. Power means noise. Noise means attention." But I was already twisting the dial. Static filled the room, sharp and grating. I turned it slowly, searching, my hands trembling. For a long moment, there was nothing but white noise, then faint, broken words. "Survivors. Cambridge. Repeat. Survivors in Cambridge." We froze. The voice was weak, distorted, but unmistakably human. Claire's eyes widened. "Someone's alive." I leaned closer, adjusting the dial. The signal crackled, cutting in and out. Safe zone. Kendall Square. Supplies. Trust no one outside. The transmission dissolved into static again. I twisted the dial frantically, but the voice was gone. Maya's face was pale, but her eyes burned with hope. Cambridge, they're across the river. If they're broadcasting, it means they're organized. It means there's a chance. Reggie shook his head, his voice sharp. Or it means bait. Raiders, scavengers, anyone smart enough to use a radio? You think the dead are the only monsters left? Elias crossed his arms, his expression grim. Doesn't matter. We can't stay here. If there's even a chance of supplies, of shelter, we take it. Claire clutched her backpack, her voice trembling. I don't care if it's bait. I don't want to be alone anymore. I don't want to hide in houses waiting to die. The room fell silent. The static hissed softly, filling the space between us. I opened my notebook, scribbling the words before they slipped away. Survivors in Cambridge Kendall Square. Trust no one outside. Maya touched the console, her hand lingering on the blinking red light. This changes everything, she whispered. Reggie muttered. Or it ends everything. But even he didn't sound convinced. We stood there caught between hope and fear. The weight of the decision pressing down on us. The hospital was collapsing around us. The dead closing in. Cambridge was across the river, a world away, but it was the first sign of life we'd heard since the city fell. Finally, Elias broke the silence. We move at first light toward Kendall Square, toward whatever's left. No one argued. I closed the notebook, my hands shaking. For the first time since Acorn Street, I felt something stir inside me. Not safety, not certainty, but possibility. The dead were everywhere, but maybe, just maybe, the living were too. The pounding on the stairwell door grew louder, the wood splintering under the relentless fists of the dead. We had minutes, maybe less, before the hospital swallowed us whole. Elias's face was grim as he braced the door with his shoulder, sweat dripping down his temple. We can't hold this, he growled. We need another way out. Maya scanned the corridor, her eyes darting to a faded sign on the wall. Subless maintenance while tunnels. She pointed there. The hospital's old service tunnels. They connect to the riverfront. If we can reach them, we can get out. Reggie cursed under his breath. Tunnels underground? That's a death trap. Staying here is worse, Maya snapped. The door cracked, a jagged hole splitting down the center. A gray hand pushed through, clawing at the air. Elias swung his axe, severing it, but the pounding only grew louder. Move, he barked. We sprinted down the corridor, the emergency lights flickering above us. The air was thick with dust and the metallic tang of blood. Behind us, the stairwell door gave way with a crash and the moans of the dead flooded the hall. The maintenance door was locked, rusted shut. Elias slammed his shoulder against it once, twice, the frame groaning. On the third hit, it burst open and we stumbled inside. The air was colder here, damp and stale. Pipes lined the ceiling, dripping water onto the cracked concrete floor. The tunnel stretched into darkness, a yawning throat that promised escape or death. We didn't have time to choose. The dead were already pouring into the corridor behind us. Elias slammed the door shut, bracing it with his body. Go, he shouted. I'll hold them. Maya's eyes widened. No, you're coming with us. But Elias shook his head, his face set. I'm slowing you down. You know it. It was true. His leg had been injured in a fight at the pharmacy, a deep gash that bled through his jeans. He'd hidden the limp as best he could, but now it was obvious he couldn't outrun them. Reggie grabbed his arm. Don't be a hero, old man. We need you. Elias shoved him back, his grip iron. You need time. That's what I can give you. The door shuddered as the dead slammed against it, their moans filling the tunnel. Elias raised him. Zaxi, his eyes fierce. Go now. Maya pulled Claire forward, tears streaming down her face. Reggie cursed, slamming his fist against the wall, but he followed. I lingered for a moment, notebook in hand, staring at Elias. He met my eyes and gave a small nod. Not fear, not regret, just resolve. I forced myself to turn away, my chest tight, and followed the others into the darkness. The tunnel twisted and turned, the air growing colder, the sound of dripping water echoing around us. Behind us, the moans rose, mingled with the crash of Elias's axe. Then came a roar, a defiant shout that echoed through the concrete and then silence. Claire stumbled, sobbing, but Maya pulled her onward. Reggie muttered curses, his face pale, his hands shaking. I wrote as we ran. The words scrolled in the dark. Elias stayed behind. The hospital took him, but he gave us time. We emerged into a wider chamber, the tunnel sloping downward toward the river. The faint smell of fresh air drifted toward us, a promise of escape. But the moans still echoed behind us, closer now, chasing us through the dark. The hospital was collapsing, not in bricks and mortar, but in spirit. It had devoured the living and spat out the dead. And now it wanted us, too. The tunnel spat us out near the river, the faint light of dawn breaking over the Charles. We stumbled onto the embankment, soaked in sweat and silence, the echoes of Elias's last stand still ringing in our ears. None of us spoke his name. We didn't have to. His absence was a weight pressing on all of us. We followed the riverbank east, skirting the edges of the city. The streets were quieter here, but the silence was deceptive. Every alley felt like a throat waiting to close around us. Every shadow seemed to twitch. By the time we reached the familiar slope of Beacon Hill, our bodies were trembling with exhaustion. And then we saw it. Acorn Street. The narrow cobblestone stretched before us, glistening in the morning light. The brownstone stood tall and silent, their shutters closed, their windows dark. It looked almost peaceful, almost unchanged, but I knew better. This street wasn't home anymore. It was a graveyard. Claire froze at the corner, her eyes wide. We can't go back there, she whispered. Not after everything. Maya placed a hand on her shoulder. We don't have a choice. The hospital's gone. The bridges are burning. We need walls, even if they're weak ones. Reggie spat onto the cobblestones, his face twisted with bitterness. Back where we started, like rats, running in circles. But he followed anyway. We all did. Because the truth was simple. There was nowhere else to go. The street was quiet, but not empty. A few infected drifted between the brownstones, their movements slow, their moans low. They hadn't forgotten this place. They never would. We slipped into the shadows, moving carefully, our weapons ready. The brownstone we had once called refuge still stood. Its door splintered, its windows cracked. The barricades were gone, torn apart in the breach. Inside, the rooms were ransacked. The air heavy with the smell of rot. The ghosts of our first knee. Gates lingered in every corner. Maya set her pack on the counter, her hands trembling. We can reinforce it. Block the basement. Seal the windows. It'll hold long enough for us to rest. Reggie shook his head. You're dreaming. This place is a coffin. We should keep moving. Moving where? I asked. My voice was sharper than I intended, but the exhaustion had stripped me raw. Everywhere we go, they're there. At least here we know the walls, the streets, the exits. Familiar ground is better than none. Reggie glared at me, but he didn't argue. He just dropped into a chair, his tire iron clattering to the floor. Claire wandered to the window, peering through the shutters. It's quieter than before, she whispered like they're waiting. Her words sent a chill through me because she was right. The infected weren't gone. They were patient. They always were. I opened my notebook. The pages smudged and torn and wrote, "We've come full circle. Back to Acorn Street. Back to the beginning. The dead awaiting, and so are we." The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. The street looked almost beautiful in the light, but beauty meant nothing now. Acorn Street wasn't a postcard anymore. It was a trap. And we had just walked back into it. The brownstone was colder without Elias. His absence clung to the air like smoke after a fire, heavy and choking. We sat in the living room, the shutters drawn, the silence pressing down on us. Outside, the infected shuffled along Acorn Street, their moans drifting through the cracks in the walls. Inside, we were ghosts of ourselves, hollowed by loss. Maya broke the silence first. She sat at the table, her hands trembling as she unwrapped the bandages we'd scavenged from the hospital. "He should still be here," she whispered. "We could have found another way." Reggie slammed his fist against the wall. The sound sharp in the quiet. "Another way. You saw him. He was bleeding out. He knew it. We all knew it. He made his choice." Claire flinched at his tone, curling tighter into the corner of the couch. Her eyes were red. Her face streaked with tears. "He saved us," she said softly. "If he hadn't stayed behind, we'd all be dead." Her words hung in the air, undeniable and unbearable. I opened my notebook, the pages smudged with dirt and blood, and wrote, "Elias, Brooks, firefighter, protector. He chose the flames so we could walk through the smoke." The words steadied me, but they didn't ease the ache in my chest. Maya's voice hardened. "Then we honor him. We don't waste what he gave us. We make this place hold. We fight." Reggie shook his head, pacing the room. "Fight against what?" "Against them." He jabbed a finger toward the door where the moans grew louder. "There's no fighting this. There's just waiting and dying." Maya stood, her eyes blazing. "That's not what Elias believed. He didn't give his life so we could sit here and rot. He believed we could make it. That's why he stayed." The argument crackled like fire, threatening to consume what little unity we had left. Claire buried her face in her hands, whispering, "Please stop. Please." I closed the notebook and stood. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. Elias made his choice because he believed in us. Not in the walls, not in the street, but in us. If we tear each other apart now, then his sacrifice means nothing. The room fell silent. Reggie stopped pacing. His jaw tight. Maya's shoulders sagged, the fire in her eyes dimming. Claire looked up, her face pale but resolute. Finally, Reggie muttered, "Fine, we reinforce the house. We hold as long as we can, but don't expect miracles." Maya nodded, her voice softer now. "Not miracles, just survival." We spent the rest of the day working in silence. Reggie dragged furniture to block the windows. Maya patched the basement door with planks scavenged from the upper floors. Claire gathered what little food we had left, dividing it into careful portions. I wrote, recording every detail, every choice, every crack in our fragile armor. As night fell, the infected gathered again. Their moans rose, echoing between the brick walls, rattling the shutters. The barricades trembled under their weight. But inside we sat together, our weapons close, our breath steady. I thought of Elias, then, his broad shoulders braced against the door, his axe swinging, his roar echoing through the tunnels. He had been a wall when the walls failed. And though he was gone, his choice remained, carved into us like fire scars. We were still alive. And as long as we were alive, his sacrifice burned on. The night pressed down on Acorn Street like a lid on a coffin. The infected had gathered again, their moans echoing between the brick walls. Their shadows stretching long across the cobblestones. The barricades rattled with every impact, the wood groaning under the weight of their hunger. We sat in the dark, weapons clutched tight, waiting for the inevitable. The first window shattered just after midnight. Glass rained across the floor and a gray hand clawed through the opening. Maya swung her pipe, the crack of bone sharp in the silence. Reggie cursed, dragging a dresser against the frame. But the sound had drawn more. Their moans rose, a chorus of death filling the narrow street. "They're coming in from every side," Maya hissed. "We can't hold this." Reggie's face was pale, sweat dripping down his temple. "Then we run out the back through the alley." "There is no alley," I snapped. "This is Beacon Hill. These houses are stacked like bricks. There's nowhere to go." But Claire, trembling in the corner, whispered, "There's a way." We turned to her. Her eyes were wide, her voice shaking, but there was certainty in her words. "My dad used to work construction. He told me some of these brownstones are connected. Old servant passages hidden between the walls. They used them 100 years ago, if we can find one." The pounding grew louder. The front door buckled, the bookshelf sliding across the floor. Dust rained from the ceiling. We didn't have time to argue. "Show us," Elias would have said. But Elias was gone. So I said it for him. Claire led us to the pantry, her hands shaking as she pushed aside shelves of broken dishes. Behind them, half hidden by plaster, was a narrow wooden door. The paint was peeling. The hinges rusted, but it was real. Reggie yanked it open, revealing a dark passage barely wide enough for one person. The air that drifted out was stale, thick with dust and age. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. The front door cracked, a jagged hole splitting down the center, fingers clawed through, gray and twitching. The moans grew deafening. "Go!" Maya shouted. We squeezed into the passage one by one, the walls pressing tight against our shoulders. The air was suffocating, the darkness absolute. I could hear Claire's ragged breathing ahead of me. Reggie's muttered curses behind. The sound of the barricade collapsing echoed through the house, followed by the crash of furniture and the guttural cries as dumb L of the dead. The passage twisted, the floorboards creaking under our weight. Cobwebs clung to our faces. Dust filled our lungs. Every step felt like it would give us away. Behind us, the moans grew louder, closer. They had found the pantry. They were coming. Claire stumbled, nearly falling, but Maya caught her, whispering encouragement. Reggie shoved from behind, urging us forward. My heart pounded, my hands slick with sweat. The walls felt like they were closing in, squeezing the air from my lungs. Then, suddenly, light. We burst into another brownstone. Its living room abandoned, its windows boarded. The air was fresher here, the silence deeper. For a moment, we just stood there gasping, our bodies trembling with relief. Behind us, the passage echoed with moans, the dead clawing at the walls. But they hadn't found the door. Not yet. Maya pulled Claire into her arms, whispering, "You saved us." Reggie leaned against the wall, his face pale. "We're not safe. Not yet. But we bought time." I opened my notebook, my hands still shaking, and wrote, "The street is theirs. The walls are ours for now." We left Acorn Street at dawn, slipping through the hidden passage into another brownstone and out onto a side street. The air was sharp with the smell of smoke, the sky painted in streaks of gray and orange. Behind us, the moans of the infected still echoed, muffled by brick and distance. But we knew they would follow. They always did. The city was quieter now, but not empty. Abandoned cars lined the streets, their doors hanging open, their windshields cracked. Papers fluttered in the breeze. Scraps of lives scattered across the pavement. Every corner felt like a trap. Every shadow a threat. We moved quickly, weapons ready, our breaths shallow. Maya led the way, her pack heavy with the medicine from the hospital. Claire clung to her side, her eyes wide, her face pale. Reggie walked behind us, his tire iron swinging loosely, his jaw tight. I stayed in the middle, notebook tucked against my chest, knife in hand. We were fewer now, but we were still moving. The Charles River glimmered ahead, its surface broken by drifting debris. The Longfellow Bridge still burned in the distance, smoke rising from the wreckage of Reggie's cab. The sight twisted my stomach. His sacrifice had bought us this chance, but it had also cut off our way back. There was no return to Boston now, only forward. We crossed into Cambridge through a side street, the city eerily silent. Storefronts were shattered, their shelves stripped bare. Bicycles lay abandoned on the sidewalks, their wheels bent and broken. The air was heavy with the smell of ash and decay. Then we heard it. A crackle of static, faint but distinct, drifting from the small radio Maya carried in her pack. She froze, pulling it out, twisting the dial. The static sharpened, then cleared, and a voice emerged. Calm, steady, almost too calm. Boston is lost. Repeat, Boston is lost. Head west. Do not remain in the city. Trust no one. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Claire's eyes filled with tears. No, she whispered. There has to be someone there. There has to be a safe place. Maya's hands trembled as she held the radio closer. Say it again, she whispered as if the voice could hear her. The broadcast repeated, the same words, the same calm tone. Boston is lost. Head west. Trust no one. Reggie cursed under his breath, pacing in a tight circle. West? West to where? The suburbs? The woods? That's not a plan. That's a death sentence. Maya's face was pale, but her eyes burned with determination. It's a direction. It's something better than waiting here to die. I opened my notebook, my hands shaking, and wrote the words down. Boston is lost. Head west. Trust no one. The letters blurred as my vision swam, the weight of them pressing down on me. The radio crackled again, then fell silent. The voice was gone, leaving only static. We stood in the middle of the street, the city silent around us. The smoke rising in the distance, the infected were out there waiting. The living might be too. And now we had a choice. Follow the voice west or carve our own path into the unknown. Maya looked at me, her eyes searching. Claire clutched her backpack, trembling. Reggie muttered curses, but his grip on the tire iron tightened. I closed the notebook, the words etched into my mind. Boston was gone. Elias was gone. Reggie's cab was gone. All we had left was each other and the voice on the radio. And as we turned west, the moans of the dead rose behind us, chasing us into the unknown. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams.